The kettlebell windmill is an advanced skill, and it's one of the most misunderstood kettlebell movements. Just Google kettlebell windmill and you'll see plenty of examples of how not to do it. It's not triangle yoga pose with a kettlebell. And it's also not a side bend. In this two-part series on the windmill, you'll learn why you should include windmills in your training, how to do the windmill and avoid common pitfalls, and progressions that are gonna fast track you to doing strong and graceful windmills. This is part one, where I'm gonna teach you two versions of the half kneeling windmill. When you're learning, this is the best place to start. In part two, we'll cover the standing windmill and all of the do's and don'ts there. So why should you do windmills? Well, they're a combination of mobility and strength. Windmills work hamstring flexibility, thoracic spine mobility, shoulder stability, and they build strength in your hips, back, glutes, core, and more. Okay, let's learn half kneeling windmill variation number one, the open half kneeling windmill to elbow. Get into your 90-90 half kneeling position. The heel of your up leg should be lined up with the ankle of your down leg. Tuck your toes under. Put your thumbs on your bottom rib and your index fingers on your hip bone. This is your rib to hip distance. It's critical to make sure that this distance doesn't change. It should stay the same throughout the movement. Let's start just by doing some hip hinges like this. Now, as we hinge, we're gonna add the rotation of our torso or T-spine. Hinge and rotate. Hinge and rotate. To see the rotation, pay attention to where my chest is facing. Now, take this arm and put it up. Look up at your hand, hinge and rotate, and place this elbow and forearm on the ground, like this. Line up your elbow and forearm with this bottom leg on this line. Don't let your rib to hip distance change. Keep your shoulders anti-shrugged. Use the strength of your hip hinge to come back up to the starting position. And keep your core engaged. Practice the movement on both sides with just body weight first, then add a light bell. Practicing the half kneeling windmill teaches us four key principles. One, we're doing a single leg hip hinge while rotating our spine. Two, we're not bending our spine, AKA lateral flexion. This is arguably the most common mistake with the windmill, which is that people side bend and they lose that neutral spine. Pay close attention to your rib to hip distance. If that rib to hip distance lengthens or shortens, you know that you've bent your spine, and that's a no-no. Three, we're keeping our shoulders anti-shrugged, especially the bell side shoulder. And four, we're keeping our core engaged. Don't get loose in here. Let's move on to our second variation on the half kneeling windmill, railroad tracks half kneeling windmill to elbow. All of the same principles apply. It's a hip hinge driven movement. The spine rotates, but it doesn't bend. The shoulders stay anti-shrugged and the core is engaged. Here's how to do railroad tracks half kneeling windmill to elbow. Get in your half kneeling position and line up your feet and knees as if they're on railroad tracks. Back toes are tucked. This arm goes up and you're gonna look up at your hand. Spiral up and back into this hip while simultaneously reaching for your front foot. Use your front foot to guide your arm into this position here in front of you. Come back up to where you started. In this second version, you should be feeling more thoracic rotation and more spiraling up and back into this hip, which is critical for a strong windmill. Let's do a few more. Here's what to focus on. Spiral up and back into the hip. Don't think about going down. Maintain your rib to hip distance, no bending. Keep your weight over your back leg. Don't fall forward. Make a big, wide chest and anti-shrug your shoulders as you rotate your torso. Practice it on both sides with just body weight first, then you can add a light bell. We just learned 2 variations on the half kneeling windmill. And more importantly, we learned the key principles that make up a strong standing windmill. Remember, the windmill is an advanced movement, so before you start practicing them, make sure you've mastered the prerequisites, the get up, and a beautiful hip hinge. Make sure to tune in next week where we're gonna apply all of these principles to the standing windmill. You'll learn how to nail it and, more importantly, how to avoid becoming an internet fail. If this was helpful, please give this video a like. See you next week where we'll take it up a notch with the standing windmill.